I stared at my phone screen, reading the text message for the third time. Madison, we want a peaceful Thanksgiving with your sister's family this year. You understand, right? Mom! My thumb hovered over the keyboard as that familiar knot formed in my stomach. The same one I'd felt countless times before when I realized I was being pushed aside again. The notification sound still echoed in my villa's marble foyer as memories came flooding back. I was 8 years old, sitting alone at our kitchen counter with a slice of pizza while the rest of my family celebrated Sarah's birthday in the dining room. The laughter from the other room felt like it was coming from another planet, one where I didn't belong. Sweetie, why don't you eat in here so you don't interrupt Sarah's special day? Mum had said, ruffling my hair in that dismissive way that meant be invisible. Even at 8, I understood the message. Sarah's moments were sacred, mine were inconvenient. That pattern followed me through childhood like a shadow. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, Mum and Dad missed the ceremony because they were helping Sarah move into her college dorm. You understand, honey, Sarah needs us right now, and you've always been so independent, Dad had said over the phone while I stood alone in my cap and gown watching other families take photos. Independent. That became their favourite word for me. It was code for, we don't need to show up for you because you can handle disappointment. College was worse. Sarah got a full ride to her dream school, plus a monthly allowance for expenses. When I asked for help with my student loans, Mum sighed like I was asking for the moon. Madison, you've always been the practical one. These loans will teach you responsibility. Besides, we're still paying for Sarah's graduate program. I worked 3 jobs to pay my way through business school while Sarah studied abroad in Italy, posting Instagram stories of wine tastings and art museums. Every photo felt like a reminder that some dreams were worth funding and others weren't. The memory that cut deepest happened when I bought my first house at 25. I'd saved every penny, worked overtime for 2 years, and finally achieved something I was genuinely proud of. I called Mum, expecting maybe just once to hear pride in her voice. That's nice, sweetheart. Actually, perfect timing. We need to talk to you about something. We're helping Sarah with a down payment for her house, and things are a bit tight. Could you lend us $5,000? You know, since you're doing so well with your little place. My little place was a 3-bedroom house with a garden I'd spent months planning. Sarah's house was a 4-bedroom colonial in the best neighbourhood, complete with a pool. But sure, Mom, my achievement was little. Sarah's was worthy of family investment. The breaking point came 2 years ago at Sarah's wedding. I'd flown across the country, bought an expensive bridesmaid dress, and even paid for part of the rehearsal dinner when Dad quietly mentioned they were short on funds. I thought maybe finally I'd be treated like an important part of the family. Instead, I got seated at table 9, the overflow table with distant cousins and Sarah's college acquaintances who barely knew the family. Meanwhile, Sarah's childhood friends sat at the family table right next to our parents. During the reception, I watched Dad give a tearful speech about his precious daughter and how blessed they were to have Sarah. Mum dabbed her eyes and nodded along. When people asked about me, Mum would say, "Oh, that's Madison, our younger daughter. She's always been the independent one." No mention of my promotion to senior financial advisor. No mention of the charity work I did. Just independent, their way of saying I didn't need recognition. That night, Sarah cornered me by the dessert table. "Mad, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, using that nickname I'd always hated. "I know you're busy with your little life, but it means a lot that you showed up. My little life, my little house, my little achievements." Everything about me was diminished with that word, little. I smiled and congratulated her because that's what I'd been trained to do. Be gracious, be understanding, be invisible when it mattered, supportive when called upon, and never, ever make waves. But something cracked in me that night as I lay in my hotel room, listening to the celebration continue without me. I realised I'd spent my entire life auditioning for a role in my own family, and I kept getting cast as an extra. The pattern continued relentlessly. Mother's Day would come and I'd get a group text. "Sarah's organising brunch for the family. You have other plans, right?" Father's Day photos on social media featured Dad with Sarah and her 2 kids, his only grandchildren according to the captions. When they planned the family vacation to Colorado last summer, Mum called to let me know they'd booked a cabin that just fits 6 people perfectly. Sarah, her husband, their twins, and my parents. "You understand, Madison, you're so independent you probably prefer your own space anyway." There it was again, independent, their get out of jail free card for excluding me from everything that mattered. The Thanksgiving text shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still hit like a slap. I read it again. "Madison, we want a peaceful Thanksgiving with your sister's family this year. You understand, right?" I started typing a dozen different responses. Why am I always the one who has to understand? Delete. When is it my turn to be included? Delete. Do you even realize what you're doing to me? Delete. Each response felt too needy, too emotional, too much like begging for scraps of love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. I'd learned long ago that expressing hurt only made them double down on the Madison is dramatic narrative. So instead, I typed what they wanted to hear. Enjoy! The emoji felt like swallowing glass, but it served its purpose. Within minutes, Mum responded, "You're such a sweetheart for understanding. We knew you'd get it." I set my phone down and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my villa in Provence, the villa they didn't even know I owned. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the vineyard that stretched to the horizon, and for a moment the beauty almost made me forget the sting of rejection. Almost. I'd bought this place 6 months ago with the bonus from landing the biggest client of my career. It was my dream home, stone walls, restored beams, a chef's kitchen, and enough space to host 50 people comfortably. I'd imagined bringing my family here someday, watching Dad's eyes light up as he explored the wine cellar, seeing Mom fuss over the garden, but they'd never even asked about my promotion. When I'd mentioned travelling to France for work stuff, they'd nodded politely and changed the subject to Sarah's PTA presidency. Now, standing in this beautiful space that represented everything I'd built on my own, I felt the familiar loneliness that success couldn't cure. I'd achieved everything I'd dreamed of, but the people who were supposed to celebrate with me were busy celebrating someone else. My phone buzzed with a call from Emma, my college roommate, and the closest thing to a sister I'd ever really had. Let me guess, she said without preamble. They uninvited you from Thanksgiving. How did you know? Because it's Tuesday, which means Sarah probably just finalised her menu and realised she needed more space for her Pinterest perfect tablescape. Am I close? Despite everything, I laughed. Emma had watched this dynamic play out for 15 years, and she'd stopped being polite about it around year 3. They want a peaceful holiday with Sarah's family, I said, sinking into my favourite armchair. I replied with a cheerful emoji because I'm such a good sport. Madison Cooper, you're many things, but a good sport about being treated like garbage is not one of them. I can hear it in your voice. You're done. She was right. Something had shifted in me as I typed that fake cheerful response. Maybe it was standing in this villa that represented my actual worth, or maybe it was just 29 years of being an afterthought finally catching up with me. But I was done pretending their rejection didn't hurt, done making it easy for them to exclude me. What if I told you I have an idea, Emma said. A gloriously petty, completely justified idea that would make them realise exactly what they've been throwing away. I straightened up. I'm listening. You know what you have that Sarah doesn't? Style, success. And a gorgeous villa in France that screams, I've made it without you. What if you threw the Thanksgiving they'll never forget and documented every gorgeous, enviable second of it? The idea hit me like lightning. You mean invite everyone they've been excluding? I mean invite everyone, period. Your cousins who got bumped from Sarah's wedding guest list. Your work friends who actually celebrate your wins. That neighbour couple who always asks about your travels. Make it the kind of Thanksgiving people dream about attending. I walked back to the window, but this time, instead of seeing my loneliness reflected in the glass, I saw possibility. This villa wasn't just my refuge. It could be my statement. They think I prefer my independence, I said slowly. Maybe it's time to show them what independence actually looks like. Now you're talking, and Madison, when they see those photos and realise what they missed out on, don't you dare feel guilty about it. They made this bed with 30 years of dismissive behaviour. After hanging up, I sat in the gathering dusk of my French villa and let myself imagine it. 30 people around my perfectly set table, wine from my cellar, food prepared by an actual chef, everyone genuinely excited to be there, no one rolling their eyes at my stories or changing the subject when I mentioned work. No one calling my life little. For the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Anticipation instead of dread for a holiday. This Thanksgiving wasn't going to be about what I was excluded from. It was going to be about what I could create. I opened my laptop and started making a list. If my family wanted space from me, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. And when they saw what I built in that space, they'd finally understand the difference between being independent and being free. The guest list started with Emma, obviously, but grew quickly as I thought about all the people who'd actually shown up for me over the years. My cousin Jake, who'd been pushed aside when Sarah decided his girlfriend wasn't family material for the wedding. My work mentor, Patricia, who'd become more of a mother figure than my actual mother. The neighbours from my old house who'd helped me move and celebrated every promotion. By the time I finished, I had 28 names, 28 people who saw value in Madison Cooper. not just the convenient, independent daughter who never complained. I created a group chat called Madison's French Thanksgiving and started typing. I'm hosting Thanksgiving at my villa in Provence this year. Professional chef, beautiful setting, and zero family drama. Who's in? The responses came within minutes. Patricia, I'll bring my famous apple cider. Jake, finally a Thanksgiving where we can actually enjoy ourselves. Emma, I'm booking my flight right now. As message after message of excitement filled my phone, I realised something profound was happening. I wasn't just planning a dinner party, I was choosing my family. For 30 years, I'd been waiting to be chosen by people who'd already decided I wasn't worth choosing. But sitting in this beautiful villa I'd bought with money I'd earned through work they never acknowledged, surrounded virtually by people who actually wanted to celebrate with me, I understood that I'd been asking the wrong question. The question wasn't why my parents kept choosing Sarah over me. The question was why I kept choosing them over myself. Tomorrow, I'd start planning the Thanksgiving that would change everything. But tonight, for the first time in years, I went to sleep feeling genuinely excited about a holiday instead of dreading it. My parents wanted a peaceful Thanksgiving without me. They were about to get exactly what they asked for, and I was about to discover what peace actually felt like. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and golden in Provence, nothing like the grey November I'd left behind in Ohio. I stood on my villa's terrace at 7 a.m. watching Chef Antoine direct his team as they transform my kitchen into something from a magazine spread. The professional photographer I'd hired, Michael, was already capturing the morning preparations. Steam rising from copper pots, fresh herbs arranged like art, golden light streaming through the ancient stone archways. Madame Madison, Antoine called out in his melodic French accent. Your turkey, she is magnifique. And the guests, they arrive when? Noon, I said, smoothing my cream-coloured cashmere sweater. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Elegant but approachable, expensive but not flashy. The kind of effortless sophistication my mother always claimed to value, but somehow never noticed when I achieved it. My phone had been buzzing all morning with excited messages from my guests. Emma had landed in Marseille and was already in the car with Patricia and 2 other colleagues from my firm. Jake was driving down from Paris with 3 of our cousins. The ones who'd been relegated to the overflow list at Sarah's wedding. My neighbours from back home, the Hendersons, had flown in yesterday and were staying at a nearby hotel, giddy with excitement about their first trip to France. At 10:30, my phone rang with an unknown international number. My heart skipped, wondering if somehow my parents had found out about the villa and were calling to, what? Invite themselves? Apologise? Demand an explanation? Hello, this is Madison. Madison, it's your Aunt Carol calling from Florida. Listen, honey, I just saw the most wonderful post from your cousin Jake about Thanksgiving at your French villa. I had no idea you'd bought a place in Europe. My stomach tightened. Carol was my mother's sister, and while we'd always gotten along well, she was definitely part of the family information network. If she knew about today, how long before my parents did? Oh, hi Aunt Carol. Yes, I bought it earlier this year. It's been a wonderful retreat. Well, it looks absolutely stunning from Jake's photos. I have to ask though, Aren't you spending Thanksgiving with your parents and Sarah? There it was, the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Actually, they wanted a quiet holiday with just Sarah's immediate family this year, I said, keeping my voice light. So I thought I'd host my own celebration here. The pause on the other end was telling. Aunt Carol might live in Florida, but she wasn't oblivious to family dynamics. I see. Well, that sounds lovely, dear. You know, your mother mentioned they were having a small gathering, but she didn't mention... Well, never mind. I'm sure you're having a wonderful time. Send me photos. After hanging up, I realised my hands were shaking slightly. This was really happening. In a few hours, the photos would start appearing on social media, and there would be no taking it back. My family would see exactly what they'd chosen to exclude themselves from. The first guests arrived at noon sharp, Emma bursting through the door with her arms full of flowers and her infectious energy filling the space immediately. "Holy shit, Madison," she breathed, looking around at the soaring ceilings and original stone walls. "You undersold this place by about 1,000%. This isn't a villa, this is a castle." Patricia followed close behind, elegant as always in her silk scarf and perfectly tailored coat. At 62, she'd been like a mother to me at the firm, mentoring me through every promotion and celebrating each success with genuine pride. Something I'd learned not to expect from my actual mother. "Madison, darling, this is extraordinary," Patricia said, pulling me into a warm hug. "You've created something truly special here." Within an hour, the villa was filled with laughter and conversation in a way it had never been before. Jake arrived with our cousins, Amy, Tom and Lisa, all of whom had stories about being sidelined at various family events over the years. The Hendersons were taking photos of everything, marvelling at the vineyard views and peppering me with questions about French wine regions. Michael, the photographer, moved through the group like a documentary filmmaker, capturing genuine moments of joy and connection. Every shot looked like something from Architectural Digest. Beautiful people in a stunning setting, everyone relaxed and radiant. At 2:00, we sat down to the most beautiful Thanksgiving table I'd ever seen. Antoine had outdone himself, a golden turkey that looked like a work of art, sides that elevated traditional comfort food to fine dining, wine from my own cellar that perfectly complemented each course. The autumn flowers I'd had flown in from Paris created centerpieces that looked both abundant and effortless. But the real magic wasn't in the setting, it was in the faces around my table. These were people who lit up when I told stories about landing my biggest client, who asked follow-up questions about my work instead of changing the subject, who treated my achievements as worth celebrating instead of minimizing them with words like little and independent. Tom raised his glass first. "To Madison for showing us what family really looks like." "To chosen family," Lisa added, "and to the courage to choose yourself." Emma, ever the instigator, grinned wickedly. "And to the most perfectly petty Thanksgiving in history. This is going to be legendary." As we clinked glasses, Michael captured the moment, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of being exactly where I belonged, with people who genuinely wanted me there. The photos started going live around 3 p.m. Emma posted first, a sweeping shot of the villa's exterior with the caption, Thanksgiving in Provence with my brilliant friend Madison Cooper. Some dreams really do come true. Grateful heart, France with friends. Patricia followed with an elegant portrait of our table setting. When your former mentee buys a vineyard in France and throws the dinner party of a lifetime, so proud of this incredible woman. Thanksgiving, 2024, Provence, women in business. Jake, bless him, went for maximum impact. Best Thanksgiving ever at Cousin Madison's stunning French villa. Some family members really don't know what they're missing. Family first, Provence. Thanksgiving, blessed but not stressed. The location tags, the hashtags, the obvious luxury of the setting, it all painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a nice dinner. This was a lifestyle. This was success. This was the kind of gathering people dreamed of being invited to. My phone started buzzing within minutes. Friends from college commenting on the posts, work acquaintances asking how they could get an invite next year, even acquaintances from back home sliding into my DMs with messages like, I had no idea you had a place in France. But the messages I was really waiting for didn't come until later that evening. At 6 p.m. French time, noon back in Ohio, my phone rang. Dad. Madison, honey, we're seeing some photos online. Did you buy a house in France? His voice had that careful, controlled tone he used when he was trying not to sound accusatory but definitely wanted answers. Hi, Dad. Yes, I bought a villa in Provence earlier this year. It's been wonderful having a place to retreat to. A villa. He repeated the word like he was testing it. And you're having Thanksgiving there with quite a few people, it looks like. I could picture him scrolling through the posts, probably with Mom looking over his shoulder, both of them trying to process that their independent daughter was hosting what looked like a magazine-worthy celebration while they were dealing with Sarah's kids having meltdowns over cranberry sauce. Yes, I invited some friends when I realised I had a free Thursday, I said lightly. Emma flew in from New York, Patricia and some colleagues came from London, Jake drove down from Paris. It's been lovely. Another pause. Jake is there? Of course that's what he'd focus on. Jake, who they'd basically written off when Sarah decided his girlfriend wasn't wedding-worthy. Jake, who'd been pushed to the periphery just like me, but unlike me, had stopped pretending to be okay with it years ago. Yes, and Amy, Tom, and Lisa too, and the Hendersons from my old neighbourhood. Really, anyone who wanted to join. The subtext was clear. Anyone who wanted to be here was welcome, unlike some gatherings. Madison, we had no idea that you had... Dad struggled with the words. How do you admit you never bothered to learn about your daughter's life? That I was successful, I supplied gently. That I'd been working towards something like this? Dad, I've been trying to share these things with you for years. When? The word came out sharper than he probably intended. When did you try to tell us about a villa in France? I told you about my promotion 6 months ago. You said, that's nice, and asked if I'd seen Sarah's new minivan. I mentioned travelling to France for work. You nodded and changed the subject to Sarah's PTA election. I've been trying to share my life with you. You just weren't interested in hearing it. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. We're interested, he said finally. We've always been interested in your life, Madison. Dad, with respect, Being interested would have looked like asking follow-up questions. Being interested would have looked like celebrating my achievements instead of calling them nice and moving on to Sarah's latest news. Before he could respond, I heard Mum's voice in the background. Let me talk to her. Madison? Mum's voice was tight with something between hurt and anger. I don't understand why you're doing this. If you wanted to host Thanksgiving, why didn't you just say so? Why all this drama? Drama. There it was. The word they always used when I did anything that wasn't quietly accommodating their preferences. Mum, you texted me asking me to skip Thanksgiving so you could have space for Sarah's family. I said enjoy, and I made other plans. There's no drama here. But you know we would have wanted to see your house. You know we would have been proud. Would you? I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Because when I bought my house in Ohio, you asked to borrow money the same day. When I got promoted to senior advisor, you spent dinner talking about Sarah's promotion to PTA treasurer. When I travelled to Europe for work, you didn't ask a single question about what I was doing there. That's not fair, Madison. We've always been proud of you. Being proud and showing pride are different things, Mom. Sarah gets celebration dinners for getting elected to the school board. I got a "that's nice" when I landed the biggest client in my firm's history. I could hear the strain in her voice when she spoke again. We're going to talk about this when you get home. Actually, I'm not sure when I'll be home. I'm thinking about spending the holidays here this year. Christmas in Provence sounds lovely, doesn't it? The sharp intake of breath told me the implication had landed. Christmas was the one holiday they'd never dared exclude me from entirely, though they'd certainly found ways to make it about Sarah's children and their perfect photo opportunities. After I hung up, I found Emma on the terrace with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the vineyard gold and purple. "How did it go?" she asked without turning around. "About like you'd expect. Hurt feelings, confusion about why I'm being dramatic, and a sudden interest in my life now that it's publicly visible." "And how do you feel?" I joined her at the stone railing, breathing in the lavender-scented air. "Lighter," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. I've spent so many years trying to earn a place at their table that I forgot I could build my own. The evening continued with the kind of easy conversation that flows when people genuinely enjoy each other's company. We moved from the terrace to the sitting room as the temperature dropped, and Antoine's team served coffee and an array of French pastries that made everyone groan with pleasure. Around 9 p.m, my phone started buzzing with texts. First Sarah, "Madison, call me, we need to talk." Then a group text from Mum to me and Sarah. "Family meeting when Madison gets back. This has gone too far." Jake, reading over my shoulder, snorted. "Now it's gone too far? Not when they've been treating you like the forgotten stepchild for 3 decades. But the message that stopped me cold came at 9:30 p.m. from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Madison, this is David Peterson from the Chronicle. We'd love to do a feature on your French villa and Thanksgiving celebration. Local financial advisors' European dream home. Would you be interested in an interview?" The Chronicle was our hometown newspaper. Someone had reached out to them about the story, which meant this was bigger than just family gossip now. This was becoming public in a way that couldn't be taken back or smoothed over with family diplomacy. I showed Emma the message, and her eyes went wide. "Holy shit, Mad, this is really happening." "I know," I said, but instead of panic, I felt something like relief. "You know what? I think I want to do the interview." Because here's what I'd figured out over the past few weeks. I'd spent 30 years making myself small to accommodate other people's comfort. I'd minimized my achievements, downplayed my success, and accepted crumbs of attention while watching someone else get the feast. But this villa, this Thanksgiving, these people who'd flown across an ocean to celebrate with me, this was my life. My real life, not the diminished version I'd been presenting to keep peace in a family that didn't value peace with me anyway. The next morning, 29 of us sat around my breakfast table. We'd pulled in extra chairs and it looked beautifully chaotic, like the best kind of family gathering. Everyone was sharing stories about the most memorable Thanksgiving they'd ever experienced. And the unanimous verdict was that this one would be impossible to top. "I keep thinking about something," Patricia said as she sipped her coffee. "Madison, you've created something here that most people only dream of. But more than that, you've surrounded yourself with people who see your worth. That's not an accident. That's intentional living." Amy nodded emphatically. "I was just telling Tom this morning, I haven't felt this welcomed at a family event since maybe ever. And we're not even technically family. But we are," I said, looking around the table at these people who'd chosen to spend their holiday with me, who'd celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges, who'd never once made me feel like I had to earn my place among them. We absolutely are family. Just the kind we choose, instead of the kind we inherit. At noon French time, the Chronicle interview would happen via video call. By tomorrow, people back home would be reading about Madison Cooper's villa in Provence, her successful career, and her decision to host Thanksgiving for chosen family in France. My parents would read that article over their morning coffee. Sarah would probably call them in a panic about the optics. The extended family would be buzzing with gossip and questions they'd never bothered to ask when it mattered. And I would be here in this beautiful place I'd built with my own success, surrounded by people who'd known my worth long before it became newspaper-worthy. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about managing their feelings or minimizing my achievements to make others comfortable. Let them see what they'd missed. Let them understand what independent actually looked like when it was chosen instead of imposed. The space they'd asked for was about to become the biggest gift they'd ever given me. The gift of finally understanding the difference between being excluded and being free.